Rob, it's going to be an emotional week here this week. End of the season, end of an era. How's it been so far this week, and what are you expecting?
It's been all right. It's been all right. I mean, obviously, it's been tough. It's been tough in some ways and great in other ways. You know, the first meeting I had with the players, I filled them in on how we were going to select the team, because we are going to make a considerable amount of changes. You know, I don't mind saying it earlier. If we give selection away to London Irish, give selection away, the team is going to be largely based on players who are here next season. You know, not 100%, but pretty close to it. I think that's the right thing to do. But the first message I put out to players in their team meeting was, I said, look guys, nobody's being punished. You know, nobody's being punished. This is not anybody's fault. But you know, my job is for us to look ahead and move forward. And I kind of, as much as I know some of those guys would have really wanted to play this week because they want to play their last game in the last game of the season. I actually think in some ways, and I know the game was a loss and that'd be frustrating for them, but in some ways, you know, that game last week was a pretty fitting way for some of those guys to finish their careers. You know, fantastic stadium in a huge game. You know, I think this is probably something that they'll get their heads around over the next day or two, because they were very frustrated after the game. But you know, good teams lose semi-finals in the Champions Cup. You know, if you go back through years and years and years of teams losing Champions Cup semi-finals, the list is incredible of very good teams. Two teams are going to lose. You can move. You should move forward. If that day defines your career, well, if that's the biggest game you played in, it's still a pretty big game to have played in. If that's the game, your last game you play, it's still a great occasion to have been involved in. And I think that's the way I went to look at them. And I'll remind them of that today, because today will kind of be our leavers lunch. The last Wednesday of the season, we do a leavers lunch. The guys will get to have a bit of a chat about anything they want to say to the squad or the coaches or anything they want to do, and we'll present them with their jerseys. And this today will be a pretty emotive afternoon. It will be, you know, because there's a lot of players leaving, and some of them have been here a long time, and they've been incredible men around this club and achieved incredible things together. So it is going to be emotive. The flip side is we've got to make it exciting as well, because we've got to make it exciting for the group that are here. You know, I've always been a big believer in talking about it's the men in the room that'll make things happen. I actually said that to the lads before the La Rochelle game. I said, look, how we start this game, what we do here, it's about you guys. You know, it's about the men in the room. You know, the stadium might be packed with French supporters, but what we do will be about how we are in here. And to be fair, I thought we turned up and we got well in the game. I think with 10 minutes in the second half, one score in it, and you know we're very competitive. Johnny Gray's injury, you know, I think people probably in a game like that, when you realise like Johnny Gray's injury, and I mean it's his injury that creates the penalty, because he can't move on the floor. Penalty goes to the corner, and then it becomes a yellow card, and all of a sudden it's 2 scores at half time. You see what I mean? And I think that probably was the deciding factor in the game. I know they scored tries after that, but by going to 14 men, losing Johnny, the pressure that kind of took off them and heaped onto us, because then you're getting tries with offloads and all sorts of stuff happening after that. And I think that was a period that kind of defined the game. But I think, you know, to be fair to the lads, they turned up. We did a lot of things right. We got a lot of things in place we wanted to, and at the end of the day, we weren't quite good enough. But you know, that was then. And interestingly enough, straight away, you know, I'm watching the game and I'm learning lessons. I can see where La Rochelle have improved. I can see areas where they beat us that we would have wanted to have won. And we can use those as some of the foundations to really show the young players who were there and experienced it for the first time, like where we need to go and what we need to achieve.
Just give me a quick reflection on this generation, that a lot of them you're losing come the end of the season, but you've seen them grow from boys into men to international players, some even British Lions. You must take a huge sense of pride from that, you and the coaches.
Oh, definitely. I mean, it's been an incredible journey. You know, I think sometimes you forget, and you forget to enjoy bits of it, because it starts to get a bit, I don't want to say stressed, but you know, you're nervy and what's going to happen here. But actually, when you look back and you think of some of the tough. This is the funny thing, you know. I felt disappointed after the game. Of course I did, because when you've been in big games and you've won big games in Europe, when you lose them, it becomes more frustrating. But like you can remember, from the first times we went to France in the Champions Cup, we got annihilated, like properly annihilated, like taught proper lessons. You know, the first time we went to Clermont was almost scary. Do you know what I mean? And Toulon in the end, you know, when they were in their pomp, you know, we were competitive for a while, but actually they dealt with us pretty well. You know, we've had some tough days in France, and every one of them is a learning occasion. You know, that semi-final wasn't our worst defeat in France by a long way. You know, and I think that's kind of the stuff that when you've got a bit of experience about these things, you need to look back on, you need to draw strength on, because no one of those games defined us, and they didn't define whether we went on to win a Premiership or win a Heineken Cup. And that's what we've got to do now. There's not going to be any one thing that defines us. It's going to be what we do in the future. And those guys, they learnt those lessons in those times. They revelled in the tough stuff, and that's what you have to do. You have to revel in the tough stuff. You have to learn to enjoy it. It has to become part of you. And because of that, they went on and they eventually came through it, and they revelled in the tough stuff when other teams didn't want to. And I think that's where, that's where they've got to have great credit, not just for winning things, but for how they were part of a group that became very tight, achieved a lot of things together, and meant a lot to each other. There's a lot of boxes those guys ticked to become a very good team.
Equally, the likes of Frost, 𝗠𝗔𝗧𝗖𝗛, 𝗣𝗥𝗘𝗩𝗜, Wyatt, Street, they will have learnt so much from playing in a Champions Cup semi-final in a red-hot atmosphere like that.
Exactly, and as I said, they will have learnt so much. They would have learned like those other guys learnt the first time we went to 𝗠𝗔𝗧𝗖𝗛, or the first time we got in a Premiership final, the first time we went and played in a big game against 𝗠𝗔𝗧𝗖𝗛 at Twickenham. All of those things that happened in the early part of our exposure, they make you a better player. They give you experience. They let the coaches see what you're good and you're not so good at. They give us. I remember we played at Ospreys in the rain, and it was a game I probably thought, like Matt at the time, we probably could have won, but we didn't. But there was 2 or 3 things happening in the game, and when we actually sat down as a group and talked about them, it was a massive point for the players, because I think the players thought it was a game we could have won, but we did a few things that made it almost certain we didn't win. And it's actually how some of the guys sat there and went, yeah, we did, didn't we? This is what we did. We're going to have to go through that with a fair bit, and we've got to take charge as coaches, but just giving these guys who are here the right information at the right time. And as I keep saying, adding the layers to them. Some of these guys are in their first season of Premiership and professional and proper sport. Some of them have played a handful of games. They've got a lot of layers to add, and it's our job to add them and make sure they really enjoy being a team and a group here at the club for an extended period.
How would you describe the Premiership campaign as a whole? Frustrating?
I suppose frustrating in some ways, but understandable in others as well. Because again, we've had a season with pretty inconsistent ability to select, both around international call-ups, and then although that kind of injury kind of curse we've had for a couple of years, where players who would have been those fill-ins and we'd have rode the storm. Also,
Bermuda, a prime example.
Yeah, so a Jacques or Richard Capstick, Yanis has been out for a period. So when that international group go away, the guys who would have slotted in just haven't been available. And I think that again was a prime. We went a long time with Marcus Street injured. We went a long time with 𝗣𝗥𝗘𝗩𝗜 unavailable. And that put pressure on other individuals. In this last period, it's been quite a long time with Harry unavailable. If you think we had a little bit of a look at his coaches the other day. We went the team that kind of won Bristol away, put in a very good performance. The next Premiership game we played had 13 changes from that team. That probably shows you what the level of how tough it is to have a bit of consistency in the Premiership, and that ultimately is what's meant we're going to finish mid-table. We're not going to finish in the top 4.
London Irish this weekend. What are you expecting? It's been a tough week for them already, but you don't know what's going to turn.
Well, here and now, first and foremost, obviously we're going to need to know if the game's on. But I mean, I don't. That is not being put down to me yet that the game's off. Although there's things dripping down that if that people are going to act very quickly around the game rather than let it drip on, as happened with kind of Wasps and Worcester. So I want to get some confirmation of that today if possible, so the players can go away on the day off knowing everything's there, the arrangements are in place and we're ready to go. Outside of that, we're just preparing this group as well as we can. They look excited, they look ready to go. It won't be perfect. There's only one prediction I can make about the weekend. It won't be perfect, but then it never is, no matter what group of players you put on the field. But I don't expect it to be perfect, but I expect it to be energetic and enthusiastic and never say die. And I expect us to win the game in 1 or 2 areas. And when I say to win the game, I don't necessarily mean on the scoreboard. I expect us to win areas of the game, and we're going to focus on 1 or 2 areas in particular, and they're going to be the very start of our foundations. The
other news this week: 𝗠𝗔𝗧𝗖𝗛 and Jenkins in the Wales World Cup training squad. No Joe Hawkins. Were you surprised by that?
I was a little bit. At the same time, I was aware that Wales were looking at various things. As I said, we've done the bits we've been asked to do. We had an expectation that he would be available to Wales. Whatever decisions they made, they're not for me to comment on. That's not for me to comment on another union. Those are their calls, their decisions. The good thing about that is we'll get Joe for a full pre-season. That will really help him integrate early on. Obviously, with Henry being away, having a centre here will be very important for us, and it will just let us have a bit of a quality pre-season across that back line with very few players away.
And obviously, finally, pre-season won't be that far away. It will soon come about. So, are you excited about next season?
Oh, definitely. And like I say, I think what I've got to do really is it's my job really to get the coaches and really understanding what we've got to go back a little bit, but also do it differently. Because one thing that has happened is, young men are different to where they were 10 years ago when we kind of started on a bit of a journey together. They're different, and we've got to appreciate that and understand it. We had to spend a bit of time just getting to know every individual probably as deeply as we were back then. So get to know them all, get to know what motivates them, get to know what ticks their boxes, what fires them up, what dampens them down. It's going to be a really interesting, exciting pre-season, and as I said, we're just all I can say to our supporters is come to Sandy Park, get ready to cheer. It's going to be exciting. It's going to be interesting. There's going to be some new stars of the future, and my job is to make sure these guys buy into what we're doing and enjoy being here so much they never want to leave.